Indeed, our modern mystics make a mistake when they wear long hair or loose ties to attract the spirits. The elves and the old gods, when they revisit the earth, really go straight for a dull top hat, for it means simplicity, which the gods love. Meanwhile, his books, appearing from time to time while as brilliant as ever, bore witness to that increasing tendency to a more careful and responsible treatment which we have remarked in the transition which culminated in Bleak House. His next important book, Hard Times, strikes an almost unexpected note of severity. The characters are indeed exaggerated, but they are bitterly and deliberately exaggerated. They are not exaggerated with the old unconscious high spirits of Nicholas Nickleby or Martin Chuzzlewit. Dickens exaggerates Bounderby because he really hates him. He exaggerated Pecksniff because he really loved him. Hard Times is not one of the greatest books of Dickens, but it is perhaps in a sense one of the greatest monuments. It stamps and records the reality of Dickens' emotions on a great many things that were then considered unphilosophical grumblings, but which since have swelled into the immense phenomena of the Socialist philosophy. To call Dickens a Socialist is a wild exaggeration, but the truth and peculiarity of his position might be expressed thus: that even when everybody thought that Liberalism meant individualism, he was emphatically a Liberal and emphatically not an individualist. Or the truth might be better still stated in this manner: that he saw that there was a secret thing called humanity, to which both extreme Socialism and extreme individualism were profoundly and inexpressibly indifferent, and that this permanent and presiding humanity was the thing he happened to understand. He knew that individualism is nothing and non-individualism is nothing but the keeping of the commandment of man. He felt, as a novelist should, that the question is too much discussed as to whether man is in favour of this or that scientific philosophy, that there is another question, whether the scientific philosophy is in favour of man. That is why such books as Hard Times will remain always a part of the power and tradition of Dickens. He saw that economic systems are not things like the stars, but things like the lampposts, manifestations of the human mind, and things to be judged by the human heart. Thenceforward until the end his books grow consistently graver and, as it were, more responsible. He improves as an artist, if not always as a creator. Little Dorrit, published in 1857, is at once in some ways so much more subtle and in every way so much more sad than the rest of his work that it bores Dickensians and especially pleases George Gissing. It is the only one of the Dickens tales which could please Gissing, and not by its genius, but also by its atmosphere. There is something a little modern and a little sad, something also out of tune with the main trend of Dickens' moral feeling, about the description of the character of Dorrit as actually and finally weakened by his wasting experiences, as not lifting any cry above the conquered years. It is but a faint fleck of shadow, but the illimitable white light of human hopefulness, of which I spoke at the beginning, is ebbing away. The work of the Revolution is growing weaker everywhere, and the night of necessitarianism cometh, when no man can work. For the first time in a book by Dickens, perhaps, we really do feel that the hero is 45. Clennam is certainly very much older than Mr. Pickwick. This was, indeed, only a fugitive grey cloud. He went on to breezier operations. But whatever they were, they still had the note of the latter days. They have a more cautious craftsmanship. They have a more mellow and more mixed human sentiment. Shadows fell upon his page from the other and sadder figures out of the Victorian decline. A good instance of this is his next book, The Tale of Two Cities. In dignity and eloquence it almost stands alone among the books by Dickens. But it also stands alone among his books in this respect, that it is not entirely by Dickens. It owes its inspiration avowedly to the passionate and cloudy pages of Carlyle's French Revolution, and there is something quite essentially inconsistent between Carlyle's disturbed and half sceptical transcendentalism and the original school and spirit to which Dickens belonged, the lucid and laughing decisiveness of the old, convinced and contented radicalism. Hence the genius of Dickens cannot save him, just as the great genius of Carlyle could not save him from making a picture of the French Revolution which was delicately and yet deeply erroneous. Both tend too much to represent it as a mere elemental outbreaking of hunger or vengeance. They do not see enough that it was a war for intellectual principles, even for intellectual platitudes. We, the modern English, cannot easily understand the French Revolution because we cannot easily understand the ideas of bloody battle for pure common sense. We cannot understand common sense in arms and conquering. In modern England common sense appears to mean putting up with existing conditions. For us a practical politician really means a man who can be thoroughly trusted to do nothing at all. That is where his practicality comes in. The French feeling, the feeling at the back of the Revolution, was that the more sensible a man was, the more you must look out for slaughter. In all the imitators of Carlyle, including Dickens, there is an obscure sentiment that the thing for which the Frenchman died must have been something new and queer, a paradox, a strange idolatry. But when such blood ran in the streets it was for the sake of a truism. When those cities were shaken to their foundation, they were shaken to their foundations by a truism. I have mentioned this historical matter because it illustrates these later and more mingled influences which at once improve and, as it were, perplex the later work of Dickens. For Dickens had in his original mental composition capacities for understanding this cheery and sensible element in the French Revolution far better than Carlyle. The French Revolution was, among other things, French, and so, as far as that goes, one could never have a precise counterpart in so jolly and autochthonous an Englishman as Charles Dickens. But there was a great deal of the actual and unbroken tradition of the Revolution itself in his early radical indictments, in his denunciation of the Fleet Prison. There was a great deal of the capture of the Bastille. There was, above all, a certain reasonable impatience which was the essence of the old republican, and which is quite unknown to the revolutionist in modern Europe. The old radical did not feel exactly that he was in revolt. He felt, if anything, that a number of idiotic institutions had revolted against reason and against him. Dickens, I say, had the revolutionary idea, though an English form of it, by clear and conscious inheritance. Carlyle had to rediscover the Revolution by a violence of genius and vision. If Dickens, then, took from Carlyle, as he said he did, his image of the Revolution, it does certainly mean that he had forgotten something of his own youth and come under the more complex influences of the end of the 19th century. His old hilarious and sentimental view of human nature seems for a moment dimmed in Little Dorrit. His old political simplicity has been slightly disturbed by Carlyle. I repeat that this graver note is varied, but it remains a graver note. We see it struck, I think, with particular and remarkable success in Great Expectations. This fine story is told with a consistency and quietude of individuality which is rare in Dickens. But so far had he travelled along the road of a heavier reality that he even intended to give the tale an unhappy ending, making Pip lose Estella forever. And he was only dissuaded from it by the robust romanticism of Bulwer Lytton. The best part of the tale, the account of the vacillations of the hero between the humble life to which he owes everything and the gorgeous life from which he expects something, touches a very true and somewhat tragic part of morals. For the great paradox of morality, the paradox to which only the religions have given an adequate expression, is that the very vilest kind of fault is exactly the most easy kind. We read in books and ballads about the wild fellow who might kill a man or smoke opium, but who would